Welcome back to OROWindMap. In our last video, we went over some of the basic functions of the site. In this video, we're going to focus a little bit more on looking at specific data layers. If I'd like to change my base map, which again we reviewed in the last video, I'm going to go ahead down here, and I think today I'll use Esri Satellite. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in just a little bit closer to that Oregon coast. Again, our data pane on the left-hand side of the screen controls all of our data layers, which are separated into these three main categories. I think that today I will go ahead and put on some human use layers. I'm going to put a boundary. So let's do federal and state waters. And let's also take a look at one of our fishing layers. So I will open one from our partners at Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. Let's do Dungeness crab. So now that I've selected those two layers that I want, I'm going to go to my active data pane. You can see those are listed together. If I wanted to toggle their visibility on and off, so not remove a layer from my active pane, but make it so I cannot currently see it, I can go ahead and use that check mark to do so. There's also a nice feature here to change the opacity of the layer. So if I feel like this looks a little bit dark for this base map, I can go ahead and brighten both of these up. And then if I wanted to remove one of these layers completely from my active pane, I would just go ahead and use that X. If I realized I made a mistake and I really wanted to have that layer, I could go ahead and use my search bar. You can see these are some of the things that I've searched for previously. I'm going to start writing Dungeness crab. You can see that every layer that has Dungeness crab, or in this case just DUN, comes up in this list. So the one that I'm looking for is Dungeness crab commercial fishing effort from 2007 to 2020. So now that I've reselected that, I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bit brighter again. Another nice feature is you can reorder these layers to create the visual effect that you want. So in this case, I actually like that the Dungeness crab layer is on top of the federal and state waters layer. But if I did want to move them, I could just drag them in the active data pane. You can see how it's gotten a little bit grayed out now because the blue layer is on top. So again, I liked it the way that I had it, but there may be cases where you would like to rearrange those layers from the order that you've turned them on. I also want to show you our legend. So if I go down to this last tab, I can see that the Dungeness crab layer represents effort from low to high. And then the federal and state waters, again, are delineated with the state waters being that lighter area out to 3 nautical miles, and then the federal waters being this darker blue, which goes out to the edge of our exclusive economic zone at 300 nautical miles. I'm going to go back to our active pane, just delete that for now. And I'd like to show you some more about the information that you can find for each layer. So if I click on this little I button to the left of the layer, first there should be a description of the layer itself. And then for each layer, there should at least be an option to look at the metadata and to look at the source. So if I go ahead and click on that metadata link, it's going to take me to a nicely organized metadata page. If I want to find out more about who to contact, if I have questions about this layer and how to do so, that's where I would find this information. And this is consistent with the entries that you would find in our GeoPortal catalog, which is something that I'll address in a future video. The other link here is source, and so this is going to bring us to the source provider. In some cases, like in the case of this layer, this brings us to the page where this layer is actually being hosted as a REST service. And so this is an ocean reports layer, which is housed in Marine Cadastre. And in this case, we're going to find a lot of the same information that we might in looking at the metadata. In cases where the data layer came from a report or a manuscript, the source link will often bring us to the link to that publication. And that can be a great place to find more information about the data that you're looking at. I'm going to go ahead and collapse the information for now and take a moment just to talk about this data slider. A number of layers in OROWindMap will have this data slider notation in parentheses, and that tells us that there are several layers that are represented by one entry, and that's because they represent something like a time series. In this case, there are three different seasons or time series represented that span from 2007 to 2020. If I'd like to animate that series, I can go ahead and click animate, and you can see how that data layer on the right on our map viewer is changing over time as it moves through those different time series. If I don't want it to be animated, I can go ahead and pause that layer, and I can move in between the layers manually with my cursor. So that's just a brief overview of how we might want to manipulate the data layers in OROWindMap and how we can look at legends as well as follow the layers themselves to look at metadata and look at the source providers. Thanks, and looking forward to seeing you again on OROWindMap.